Hey guys, it's Karen, and today I want to talk about how I do my hand sewing. There's about 4 stitches that I use when I'm hand sewing: the running stitch as a basting stitch, the half back stitch, which is my go-to all-purpose stitch, the whip stitch, and the ladder stitch or the invisible stitch. I'm not going to do those second 2 today, but I'm going to talk about the first 2 and give you some tips if you're a beginner sewer on getting started with hand sewing for doll clothes. The first thing I want to talk about is when you're doing your stitches, like your hems, your seams. I usually go ahead, even if I'm using the sewing machine, because I'm still learning how to be consistent with the sewing machine. I usually draw out the seams on my fabric. Now, I've just used a pencil here. I hope you can see it. I try to do it fairly like a medium weight darkness. I wouldn't recommend using pencil. What I would recommend using is a disappearing ink pen, which you can get online or in craft stores for sewing in the sewing supply section, or a water soluble or a heat erasable marker. Usually the heat erasable is what most people use because, you know, you're supposed to iron your work. This is not ironed. I don't have my iron going right now, so we're going to use just the pencil. And I generally, for hand sewing, because I don't have an iron going, I usually use this, but it's running out of ink. The downside of this is that if you try to prepare something like the day before and then you can't, like, you're going to cut your pieces out and you want to like draw your lines and everything else. Usually if you have to come back to it hours or a day later, this is either going to be completely faded or gone, or just like barely legible or gone. So it's something that you want to use fairly quickly after you're putting it down. But we're just going to use a pencil for today. I'm going to try to use some thread. Hopefully you'll be able to see this, like red thread. And I'm going to talk about how to thread it for hand sewing. And I usually use a fine needle, a smaller, the better. You can use any size needle, obviously, but getting your stitches smaller and more consistent and going fast on a running stitch is easier with a smaller needle than the larger one. The other thing you may or may not use, which is optional, is Thread Magic or beeswax. It's a thread conditioner. It lays the fibers down smooth and it helps prevent tangling. I sometimes use it, I sometimes don't. Depending if I'm like using a thread that is really prone to tangling, then I'll use the thread conditioner. Tangling is a nightmare. It will always happen. I always have tangles. Yeah. The other thing is when you're pulling out your length of thread, don't make it too long. If you're starting out, it's better the longer the thread, the more tangling will happen. So, you know, it's better to take about 10 inches. I don't know, 12 to 15 inches of thread, because you can always like tie it off and then rethread and start over, like with the next thread. The other thing I recommend is do not double up your thread inside of your needle, because if you make a mistake, you cannot unthread it and fix your mistake. Use a, here, we'll go ahead and run it through Thread Magic. This is easy. It has grooves in the side. So you just take your thread on either end, like start with one end, pop it through these grooves right here, and then just pull it through. And that just gets some conditioner on the thread. You can do it 1 or 2 times. Doesn't really matter. Okay, I'm going to thread the needle. Hold on, I got to look at it closely because it's small. It's a very small eye. Got to do this off camera with my nearsighted eyes. Okay, so thread it through. Do not double it up. Leave a tail. I mean, you can sew with it doubled up. A lot of people do, but the problem is if you make a mistake, you cannot unthread it off the needle and pull out your stitches. You're going to have to cut the whole thing and start over. So, or rethread it, like tie it off and rethread. So then I wrap my thread around 6 or 7 times. I pinch the wrap I've just made between my 2 fingers, and then I pull it all the way through until I make a knot, which I didn't do there. Let's try that again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It doesn't have to be 6 or 7. It just needs to be fat enough that it's going to hold. That's just the number I generally do. And there's my knot. Okay. Now I'm going to start with the running stitch. Most people come up through the fabric like that You can do that. That's fine. I usually just tend to start right on the line, and I just pop my thread through right away, because when I come out, the knot's going to catch. Now the running stitch is you go down, and instead of doing this, instead of going down and then trying to poke it up on the line again evenly, up, which takes time, right? The running stitch, you keep your needle parallel to the line, and try to keep your thread coming out down, and then you go down on the line and then up, touching the line. Okay, so down, up, and pull it through. Now most people already know this stitch. I didn't get that perfect that time, but I'm going to try again. Then we go down, up, and through. There we go. And then you want to try to keep the distance between the thread where it's coming out. I like to try to keep the distance here the same width as the stitch, if that makes sense. It's not perfect. It only needs to be perfect if you are doing a top stitch where people are going to see it down and up on the line. Now, I do not use this seam very often, and that one's too big for me. This is more like a gathering stitch. When I'm actually trying to sew, I like to keep 2 to 3 millimeter stitch length. On my sewing machine, it's 2.5 is the stitch length that's set. So when you really get going with this, it's a very fast stitch, which is why it's called the running stitch. Now, I just did those two. Let's see how big those stitches are. Let's see here. With millimeters, we need to get to the millimeters. The centimeters, I cannot see with these. Okay. I'm so nearsighted, you guys. So this stitch here is about 3 millimeters, and the gap is about 2, and this stitch is about 3 millimeters. Yeah, so this is pretty even. Okay, now the reason I don't use this stitch, there's a couple of reasons. If you're going, a lot of hand quilters use this, and I think this is a hand quilting needle because it's small. You can make these really small, and you can go really fast, like this. And it's perfectly fine. It's a perfectly fine stitch. The downsides of this stitch, so see, nice, even, secure. The bigger the stitch, if you use this and you make big stitches, you're going to be doing a basting or a gathering. A basting stitch, which temporarily holds things in place and it can be easily removed, or a gathering stitch, which then you pull to gather the fabric for when you're doing a skirt. The downside of this stitch is it's not very strong, so you should only use it as embroidery decoration, or if you're doing a side seam or something that's not going to take a lot of strain, wear, or weight on that seam. You can make it a little stronger by doing the running half back stitch, whereas you go in, you go out, you make your 2 or 3 stitches, and then you do a half back stitch, which is what I'm going to show you down here. But basically you just go right here and then come back out on the line. Okay. And then you keep going with your running stitch. So that adds a little bit of security to it. A lot of clothing, which was hand sewn in the past, they would sew up side seams and stuff with that running stitch, but they would fortify it with the half back stitch every once in a while. And here you can see it. The half back stitch is close together because I put it right next to the other stitch. And then you go on with your running stitch. If you're going to baste your stitches, you want to keep them a lot bigger, like this, or gather. You want to keep them bigger because these are just temporary stitches. They're just holding something in place, but they do not need to, they're not going to be permanent. You are going to be taking them out, and it's easier to seam rip a very large gather. Now, when you come, a very large running stitch. Now, when you come to the end, I usually just go in where I came out, come up, and go through the loop to make a knot. I sometimes do it twice. You know, it just depends on how, hold on, I gotta see this. I made that loop too small. Okay, I come out twice, and then sometimes, apparently I made a knot in the third. Whatever, you guys get the point. I think you guys know if you know how to do the running stitch. So see, it's already knotted off. Let's cut it off. I don't know what I was doing there. Okay, it's because I'm trying to see around this. For tiny things, I'm trying to see around this camera. So, and I'm not used to filming like this, guys. So I'm sorry. Now, if we're going to do the half back stitch, there's pros and cons to this stitch as well. So let me get this, cut off. This uses more thread. That's something to keep in mind. And so you probably will have to tie off, like knot off like I just did at the end and start, you know, more stitches. It is a stitch that must be sewn on the front side of the fabric because it is not as attractive on the back side, and it's relatively quick, and it looks from the front the most like a sewing machine stitch if you put the stitches close together. That's part of the reason I like it. I will top stitch with this. I also use it because to me it's quick and easy. It's easier to me to keep it consistent, and it's stronger. It's much stronger. I'll use this when I'm sewing down gathers, or I mean, I use this for everything. Yeah, the only thing I use the running stitch for is gathering and basting. So with the half back stitch, it's you can either come up from the back or you can just go in straight from the side, but we'll come up from the back because this is a back stitch. Okay, so you bring your needle through where you want it, you pull it up, and then you go back. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Now I like to keep these stitches about 2 to 3 millimeters. And the key to this is, you see where my needle is going through, I want to come out on the other side the same distance. So I've got like maybe like what, 2 millimeters there between where I go in and the thread. So I want to come out about 2 millimeters on the line from where the thread and the needle come out. So you want it to be equidistant on either side of the thread coming through the fabric. Okay, I hope that made sense. This is actually making me dizzy looking at it through the camera, guys. Okay, so now here's the trick. You want to go through right where you want to go right through, like either right there in the same hole or right next to it. I'm going to go right next to it, or I mean, it doesn't really matter, but I like them to be touching. And then I come out on the other side and try to keep this equidistant. Try to keep that equidistant. Do you see? Now, and that looks pretty good. All right, I'm doing better. I'm getting used to this camera. So we will go down and up. Now that's not equidistant, but I was getting a little short there. So I'm going to widen it up. Now, if I'm just doing a seam, it doesn't really matter if they're completely perfect because nobody's going to see it, right? You just want to keep it fairly consistent and, you know, do your best. If you're top stitching and you're picky like I am, you're going to want to try to keep them as equal as possible. Now you see they look very much like a machine stitch because they're touching each other. The back side does not look like a machine stitch. Okay. All right. Down, under, and up, trying to keep this on the line and an equal distance between each stitch. Here we go again. So you're like pivoting under this. You're pivoting under this fabric. Now I'm just going to run a couple of these really quick, and I'm going to show you what you do if you make a mistake. Yeah, when I'm not, I go a lot faster when I just have it up to my face and I'm sewing. But I'm not being completely consistent here, which again, it's fine for a seam. Nobody's going to see this. This is just, now I went underneath the line there. That's not great. So if I was top stitching, I'd probably let that go, but maybe I'm not going to. Maybe it's going to be right in the front of the bodice and I want it to be perfectly even. You don't pull it from here, okay? When you're unpicking it, you don't want to unpick it from the front side because sometimes it gets stuck in knots. You want to go to the back, all right? And you find your long thread. This is what the back looks like. And this is why I say you don't want to sew this stitch on the front of the fabric because it's not very neat. It overlaps if you're not, it overlaps over the stitches and if you're not perfect, this is what you get. Like if you're sewing a seam, nobody's going to see this, nobody cares. But okay, back to the mistake. I have to pull it out from the last stitch on the back side first. Pull that out. Now you can see why if I had doubled up the thread, this would not be possible and you can't fix your mistakes, which is why I never use doubled up thread on my needle. And then you go to the front and you pull it out that way. All right. So let me go ahead and get this threaded again. I've lost my needle because I can't see because I took off my glasses. And we will get going. So you can make these stitches bigger. And this stitch is also really good if you're hand sewing jersey knits. Don't ever use a running stitch on a jersey knit because they will pop. They are not strong enough to accommodate for the stretching. So this actually is better as long as you're sewing something that doesn't have to stretch like a huge amount. It should be fine. It will hold the seams because it's doubled up. It's strong, right? So I always use this when sewing t-shirts or knit fabric on for the dolls. I always use this stitch. All right, let's get this back. Try to keep your tail straight down so you can see what you're doing. I've rethreaded it. And I'm going up. Now, if you don't have a line, did I just make a knot? Yeah. All right. I just made a knot. Luckily, this one's not too bad because the thread is starting to curl on itself. That's something that happens with these running back stitches. The thread it starts to curl, to twist, and then you're prone to lots of knots. This one will be easy to just pop out, but that can get worse. And hopefully that does not happen here. Although if it does, I will show you how to deal with it. It just takes forever. And if it's too bad, I'll just knot it off and get a new thread and start over. So I missed the line there. So we're going to try again. And I have very dirty nails today, guys, because I was sewing on, a fabric that was bleeding. So I apologize for that. But okay, so now I think I'm back on the line. We're going to keep going. And again, if I was just quickly sewing a hem and I did not care about it being perfect, then I wouldn't care that it's wobbling slightly. The only time I really get fussy is if I'm top stitching on the front of like on a bodice or something where it's going to be seen, or top stitching a hem or something, or hemming something, because I do use this for the hem stitch, and it can get kind of dicey doing the hem because you have to sew from the top. So if your hem is not, gosh, this is getting really tangled. Let me unhang it so it spins back correctly. So sometimes it's difficult to sew like things like a hem, but a seam, it's really easy to sew with this stitch. You will catch your fabric. You'll catch your pins if you have any. You'll catch everything. All right. Down, try to make it equal. I'm like rubbing off my pencil line here. If you don't have a pencil line, and you need it to be equal, say that we'll pretend that this, hold on a second. Let me draw something really quick. We will, just going to darken this up. Because I'm holding my thumb and I'm going backwards on this line, I am rubbing it off a little bit. But let's pretend that we've got our fabric folded over. Come here, you. Oh, it's twisting up. The thread conditioning would help with this. I probably would need to run it through the thread conditioning again, but I'm not going to. Okay, so say that, this line here is the top of our folded hem that we're doing, right? And we don't have a line that we're using here. The trick to keeping this, I'm not going to keep it folded because I'll catch it. The trick to keeping this even, if you don't have a line that you've drawn as a guide, is to try to keep your needle always parallel to the edge. So pretend this line up here, if you can see it, that I faintly drew, pretend this line is the edge of the folded fabric. When you're doing, and you don't have a line down here, it's harder because if you're trying to be perfect, you don't have, you have to kind of eyeball and try to keep this at, you know, your 1/4 inch or your 3/8 of an inch or whatever you would, or your 1/8 of an inch if you're top stitching or whatever. But as long as you keep visually your needle parallel to the fold, you can stay pretty straight, right? So this is not taut. All right, there we go. That's nice and taut now. So you want to keep this parallel to that top line. So you put it in and you try to keep it, when you pull it out, oh gosh, hold on guys. Sorry. All right, so you put it in, and when you come out, you want to make sure that that your needle comes out parallel to the top line. And that's how you know you're going to stay straight if you didn't have this guideline here. But that's harder because not only is it harder to, I mean, it's easier to keep it straight, but what's hard is not keeping this equidistant, keeping the length that, you know, that you want it from the top of the hem edge. So I really recommend always draw a line when you are hand sewing. Take the extra time. It will really help the look of your stitches become more professional and faster in the long run if you're not trying to do this in a camera like I am. Yeah, this is really difficult in a camera, guys. Now, I hope that you've gotten the idea. Also, you just want to make sure that, like, I'm having problems. Every once in a while, I will pull this taut just to make sure that you don't want it like so tight that the fabric puckers or gathers, but you do want to make sure that you don't have loose stitches here, okay? So yeah, so you just put it in right next to it. Go equidistant on the other side if you can. Come up on your line, pull through. Hopefully that is enough to give you guys an idea of how to do the half back stitch, and gives you an idea. Again, this is not, it's pretty straight and pretty decent, but it's not something I'd want on the front side of my fabric, okay? But see, on the front side with this line, it looks very, I mean, it's not 100% perfect, but, you know, it's looking like if this was this section was a top stitch right here, it's looking really decent. It's, you know, I would be happy with that. And again, if this is a hem or a seam that you're sewing, that's perfect. Nobody's going to care because nobody will see your seam. The hem they would see, but the seam, they wouldn't see it at all. So this is fine. And I think I came out a little bit too far there for my liking, but... And now I'm having a hard time on that side. But anyway, again, in a seam, that won't be a problem. I'll just keep adjusting as I go. I just want to try to be somewhat consistent throughout and stay nice and even as far as, like, I don't want my crooked seam or anything. So it doesn't matter, like that right there. If this was a top stitch, I would pull that out. If it's a side seam, that's fine. We'll just live with it. It's not going to be that much of a problem. So we just go on. All right. If you have any questions about how to do this half back stitch, let me know in the comments below. And let's say that we run out of thread, okay? Let's say I'm getting really short. So what I would do is I would just go through, come up right next to it, basically doing a regular back stitch. And then I would go through my fabric and I'll tie it off. And then I usually, for security, I'll usually go back If I'm doing a seam or something, I'll usually go back through and come back out again. And then I will cut it off. Why are you not working? There we go. And so I've restrung my thread. Yeah. And I'm going to do my wraps. It ends up about 6 to 7. I usually just do it by feel, you know, like with feeling. And then I will go back down right next to here. I try not to do this on a top stitch, but on a side stitch, it's okay. I kind of go back a little bit into the seam before the knot. And I'll come out. I try to have enough length for the top stitches because I want to keep everything consistent, right? So I'll usually do it in a place, like if I'm going to run, I try to plan, like maybe I would do it in the underarm or somewhere like that. But on a side seam, it doesn't really matter. Nobody's going to see it. I just want to go back a little bit to make sure that I'm not going to lose, you know, just for security. Now you can see how my thread is really twisting. This is the main problem with this. One of the main problems with this stitch is that it really twists up, and you will get knots, and it becomes a real pain in the butt. So every once in a while, try to if you're trying to use your thread and be thrifty, you know, and not cut new, because I'm telling you, this will not. I'm hoping it doesn't do it on, you know, try to remember to keep it down, keep your thumb on it to stabilize it, you know, if you have to. And I really like hand sewing. It's, especially if I'm first making a project. I'm not like so accomplished with my sewing machine yet. I'm still learning. So and especially on a small project, so like if I am making a Blythe outfit or a Barbie outfit for the first time, I usually hand sew it, even though it takes me a lot longer, because I have so much more control over my stitches. And it just really, I don't know. It's just, especially with sleeves and things at that small size, it's much easier to, I don't know, for me, it's just much easier to hand sew it. Like usually and then once I've learned the pattern and I understand what's going on, I can take it over to my machine and try it on there. You know, I might just try it if it's a larger pattern for like a 1/4 scale doll, or, you know, or a smart doll. I might just try the whole thing on my machine. But when you're doing a really small outfit for dolls, it's much easier for me to try it out with hand stitching at first. That may or may not be the case for you. You might be so good with your machine that it doesn't really matter. Now I feel like I'm getting a little bit loose here, so I'm going to turn it over. I'm just going to tug on my stitches to make them a little bit taut, nice and flat, and I'll just continue to the end of the line. So yes, that is all I think I have to say about these two stitches. If you have any questions please let me know. And if you found this was helpful and you'd like me to show you, all right, so I'm not digging these. I'm not digging this, like pretend I'm top stitching again. I'm just going to show you how to take this out. Unthread your needle, just pull it off. Don't pull it from the front side because that can cause knots. I mean, you can, but it's just easier to turn it over. And the reason it's harder to do it is because it overlaps these stitches. See that? It's actually coming from here and going to there. So pull it out from the back first, turn it back over. What the heck? Where is it? What's going on? Sorry, I'm getting really dizzy doing this. Does anybody else who makes content get dizzy when they're filming in the camera like this? Hopefully it's not making you guys dizzy. Always use the eye side of your needle to unpick. I mean, you don't have to, but it's just easier because it's rounded and nice. It doesn't catch on the fabric. And then pull that out. And then say I was top stitching and I don't like the way this is going cockeyed here. Again, I want to pull it back out because I didn't hit the line there. Turn it over, pull it back out from the back, turn it back over, and get it from the front. Okay. Now let's say that we're done. I'm just going to show you how to tie it off one more time. but I have to thread the needle first. Let me know in the comments if you also, not only if you have any questions, but if you hand sew a lot, and if so, do you use the running stitch or the running half back stitch for your seams, or do you already know this half back stitch? And if you don't and you hand sew, are you going to try it? So we're going to tie it off again. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to do a full back stitch now. So I'm going to go where I came out. I'm going to come up a little bit beyond it, right next to it. Gosh, sorry guys. Into the fabric and right. That's too close. Yeah, I want to go right beyond it. I don't know. I mean, I could have done it there. I can do it there. It's fine. Then I'm going to put my needle through this loop and make a knot. And I usually like to just put it in again and run it through so it doesn't fall out, right? It's going to be like, I'm making another knot, but I'm just pulling it backwards. So it's like secured itself underneath that stitch, right? All right. So, and then we just clip our thread, and we are done. Now, I think I messed up here. Like, I probably should have done it. Like, so if you're doing a seam, okay, I didn't mess up. This is my final thought. That's right. If I was doing a seam, having it come out on the front side is fine because, you know, it's going to be folded over. All of this is going to be hidden in between the two sides of the material. On the front side, I would not have done it though. I wouldn't want it to show. So, but yeah, but if you're just sewing the seams, that's perfectly 100% fine. Nobody cares. Nobody will see it. And that's it. Again, let me know if that was helpful, and I'll see you guys again soon.